body's like a melody in my head. Got me so singing like a singing like. I think I like that. Welcome back to another Easy Mind reaction, guys. Today we are reacting to the channel Academy of Ideas, 1.45 million subscribers. Title being, Why Are So Many People Neurotic? Carl Jung as Therapist. I thought this would be an interesting video to react to because I can, although you know me, I don't really condone or suggest myself to labels, but you know, not really being of the world, I can still understand how even I can label myself or see myself to be as an individual who can be described as neurotic. All right, I get it! That was a long route just to say what I had to say. But anyways, yeah, so I was like, you know what? I actually see it a lot online when I'm scrolling through TikTok, when I'm scrolling through social media, and I see this behavior or see this term come up a lot. And you know what? I said, let's learn more about it, or let's learn about the reason as to why so many people are now relating, associating themselves with the idea, with uh, term, the terminology, or just the term, probably. But yeah, I don't think there's any much to say. There's nothing in the description. We'll take a look at the comments afterwards, but let's jump right into the video.
By becoming a supporting member, you will access 71 exclusive videos, $9 a year.
That's great and all.
Learn more.
Love it.
There are just as many people who become neurotic because they are merely normal, as there are people who are neurotic because they cannot become normal. That it should enter anyone's head to educate them to normality is a nightmare for the former, because their deepest need is really to be able.
Hold on. I'm sorry. It takes me a minute to really. I feel like I gotta read it myself to really comprehend it. Otherwise, it's just gonna go in through one ear and the other. So, there are just as many people who become neurotic because they are merely normal, as there are people who are neurotic because they cannot become normal. That it should enter anyone's head to educate them to normality is a nightmare for the former, because their deepest need is really to be able to lead abnormal lives. Hopefully, they'll dive more into that because I'm still quite confused on what's Mr. Carl Jung is
able to lead abnormal lives. With an education system that indoctrinates us to think alike, a mass media that ensures we fear alike, an advertising industry that gets us to like the same things, and a social media that makes it easy to shame and ridicule all those who step too far out of line. Many people are conformists, but many in the modern day are also neurotic, and so a question arises. Is there a cause and effect relationship between too much conformity and neurotic illness? The great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung believed there was, and in this video, we are going to explore what a neurosis is and how being too conformist makes us susceptible to this form of illness.
Please do.
A neurosis is a psychological disorder defined by persistent and deep levels of anxiety and an overall fear of life. In addition to these cardinal symptoms, a neurotic illness may also include depression, guilt, phobias, obsessions and compulsions, excessive worry and rumination, insomnia, irritability, or anger. Carl Jung suggested that the neurotic's fear of life was a result of a disturbed or diminished process of adaptation.
I think well, I already stated, I didn't really go over the definition of what it meant to be neurotic, but I did share that I do relate to the idea. And I talk to my father a lot of times, and I often get this feeling of this strangeness, type of feeling where I feel pulled in the direction of the way in which everybody is going, the quote unquote conformed way of life, and it's kind of just the idea of just falling in line. And part of me is like, maybe I should just follow suit, maybe I should just be of the world. But a lot of times way more than a lot of times, more often than not, I feel the need to be just with myself. I feel the need to be myself, for lack of better ways of putting it. I don't really feel comfortable with hearing what another person has to say and following along with it, especially if I don't feel as if it would be their advice or their way of living or whatever they're saying to do or to be or to act is something that would, sit right with me. And so oftentimes I do butt heads with a lot of individuals or a lot of groups which I try to work with, and I try to be a team player, but it's just hard for me. I don't, and a lot of that leads to being misunderstood. But I also wrote a quote. It was recently. It was due to me starting this job at Amazon, and that really, struck a chord with me, where I was feeling dispirited, and I was feeling, you know, moments of depression had came about. But I guess for people who write in those times of sorrow and those times of um, tragedy, although I can't refer to not liking the job as tragedy, but you know in those times, for those who write, a lot of good words, a lot of good ideas, and a lot of good creative um, happenings take place. And I think I did get some good writings out of that. One of which being, what was it? It says, to live misunderstood is to live a life where people, no, to live misunderstood is to live a life where people look to kill you, or something like that. I'm gonna find it. Yeah. Oh lordy lord, where is it? Okay. To live misunderstood is to live a life where people constantly look to kill you before you die. And that was the whole idea I was getting at. Kind of basically what they've talked about the whole time. You have this way of life that you're comfortable with. You feel content with where you are in life or what you're doing. And then everyone around you is telling you to change, to act in a certain way, to be this way, to say you're not doing things the right way. And then if you're like me, someone who's constantly self-reflecting, constantly considering outside perspective, not for the sake of looking to conform, but for the sake of trying to get a better perspective of the whole, you kind of become pulled in these many different directions, because you have what's going on inside you, you have what's you're saying in your head, but then you're also pitting it up against what what the outside world is saying, and it could be a lot to handle. But yeah, I guess that's my take, my outlook on that. Ugh.
Fear of life was a result of a disturbed or diminished process of adaptation and a morbid development of the whole of a personality. A neurotic, in other words, is an individual who fails to adapt to the demands of life, whose personality is stunted as a result, and whose existence, therefore, becomes a continual struggle with little to no reprieve. While a neurosis isn't necessarily fatal, it slowly but surely saps the vitality out of life. A neurosis destroys our potential, places us in the constricting confines of an ever shrinking comfort zone, fills us with guilt for a life not lived, wreaks havoc on relationships, inhibits the cultivation of skills, and damages our physical health due to the effects of chronic anxiety and depression on the body. Jung went as far as to call a neurosis the agony of a human soul in all its vast complexity. According to Jung, a neurotic illness is triggered by three conditions. Firstly, an individual is confronted with a challenge, task, or problem in an important domain of life. Secondly, because of cowardice, laziness, self-doubt, or just plain stupidity, the individual evades the challenge rather than facing up to it. If we follow the history of a neurosis with attention, writes Jung, we regularly find a critical moment when some problem emerged that was evaded. The existence of a problem that one wishes to evade is not sufficient to produce a neurosis. Rather, a third condition is necessary: and that is the use of defense mechanisms to force the problem out of conscious awareness. It would be a serious misunderstanding to confuse the existence of problems with
Okay,
neurosis.
yeah, I was gonna say.
There is a marked difference between the two in that the neurotic is ill because he is unconscious of his problems. Common defense mechanisms include repressing thoughts, displacing emotions, projecting one's problems onto another person.
Okay. Um, on second thought, like, okay, and that's why I said I associate it with some parts of it. I don't know if I fully, or even, I'm just say fully. I don't know if I even fully fit the definition or the idea of what it means to be neurotic. I share some symptoms, but I don't see myself as someone who, as they just stated, looks to project their problems onto other people, or I don't have any, repression of thoughts. I actually do the quite opposite. I look to bring my thoughts to the light and look to play with them and toil with them, speak to them as if they were another person. And I don't really, so it's weird. It's weird. I don't know if there's a label or a term for how I could be or how I'm describing it, but yeah, on this part, I don't really relate to this. But let's continue to learn.
Compulsive activity to
Oh, take it back
keep
a little bit.
projecting one's problems onto another person. Compulsive activity to keep oneself distracted, self medicating into a numbed out state, or avoiding situations that trigger awareness of one's problem. The use of defense mechanisms is paid for at the cost of increased anxiety, for as Jung wrote regarding one of his neurotic patients. By repressing disagreeable thoughts, she created something like a psychic vacuum which, as usually happens, gradually became filled with anxiety. Had she troubled herself consciously with her thoughts, she would have known what was lacking, and she would then have needed no anxiety states as a substitute for the absence of conscious suffering. Evading and denying the tasks of life is very common in the modern day, and this is contributing to epidemic levels of neurotic illness. Jung pointed to several factors that can account for this. Firstly, many parents pass on to their children a neurotic approach to life. For children, emulate the fear of life of the neurotic parent, and from an early age learn to evade life's problems, or as Jung explains, the psychic disorders of children are more often than not causally connected with the psychology of the parents. And in most cases, one would do well to pay more attention to the faulty attitude of parents and educators than to the child's psyche, which in itself would function correctly if it were not disturbed by the harmful influence of the parents.
Okay, young.
A second factor responsible for the high rates of neuroses is an unwillingness of many young adults to adequately separate themselves from their parents as they approach adulthood. For to become an adult in body, but remain a child in mind, is to ensure one will be afflicted with a neurotic illness, or as Jung explains, though it is a misfortune for a child to have no parents, it is equally dangerous for him to be too closely bound to his family. An excessively strong attachment to the parents is a severe handicap in his later adaptation to the world, for a growing human being is not destined to remain forever the child of his parents.
Mm-hmm.
Social forces are also promoting the laziness and passivity that leads to the neurotic evasion of life's tasks. For example, there is an excessive use of addictive technologies, paternalistic governments that inhibit the cultivation of self responsibility, diets that are suboptimal for energy production, an overuse of psychotropic and recreational drugs, and a moral system that no longer elevates the virtues of courage and self reliance to their rightful spot in the pantheon of values. But while many reasons can account for the existence of so many neurotics, the important question for the sufferer is how to effectuate a cure. According to Jung, the approach we should take depends on whether the problem we are evading lies in the collective outer world of people, places, or things, or in the individualist inner world of our psyche. In my picture of the world, Jung wrote, there is a vast outer realm and an equally vast inner realm. Between these two stands man, facing now one and now the other. Problems in the outer world tend to take the form of failures to meet the basic demands of social life. For example, some people struggle to make friends or to establish intimate relationships. Others fail to attain gainful employment or to contribute to their community. Still others fail to develop an adequate persona or social personality. These problems are of a collective nature in the
See, okay, so here's my kind of, I guess, problem. It's funny because of what I'm attacking, but like I just don't see, like, what if someone is okay with their neuroticism? You know, if someone's okay with not being part of society, or not being, or not having to indulge in certain social practices. Like for me personally, I don't readily look to participate in every social event that passes by or that's ongoing, and I, very seldomly do, you know, get out or look to go to social events, but like I'm okay with that, I find serenity, I find joy, I find peace in being able to be by myself, and just think to myself, do things by my lonesome, and that's not to say I'm completely against being with other people. I feel like I know how to conduct myself in a public setting, but it's just like if I don't take a liking to it personally, why is it wrong? Why is it considered a wrongdoing to be by myself, or why is it considered a wrongdoing to be against going out? Be against being part of society. And I feel like it could be referred to as a a game in a sense. That's the way I picture it. I was actually working on a series in which I was going to go more in depth in that. I was trying to save from talking about it on the reaction because it was one of the topics, like I just said, I was going to talk about on the series I was working on. But yeah, to me, it's all a game. It's almost like if you want to participate in the game, if you want to participate in ways of life, then and by all means follow suit. But then it's also the idea in not participating, quote unquote, not participating is like you're not really stepping outside of the game, because the game is life, and as long as you're alive and existing and experiencing, you're part of the game. It's just some people don't look to be as active in the game as others, I guess I would say. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But yeah, I don't know if you could really consider it neurotic if I'm aware of it, conscious of it, and I'm like, you know what, I understand I could be doing this on the third, and at any moment I could look to indulge, look to participate. But for the time being, I have no desire to take part.
social personality. These problems are of a collective nature, in the sense that they represent challenges of life that all members of a society must face up to. And Jung called cases of neurotic illness caused by evading these tasks instances of atrophied collective adaptation. Individuals afflicted with this type of neurosis
Syndrome
need to
disorder.
become more normal in the sense of cultivating the basic skills needed to function successfully in society. Previously, because of his illness, writes Jung, the patient stood partly or wholly outside life. Consequently, he neglected many of his duties, either in regard to social achievement or in regard to his purely human tasks. He must get back to fulfilling these duties if he wants to become well again.
See, it's like I don't know. I guess I have my um disdain for this idea, for this, ideology. I just don't see why. That was another thing I was going to talk about. The phrase, what was it? There's no need. I think that could be applied to everything which exists and which we're able to experience. There's really no need for anything to exist, but it does. And so within that, you have the choice to participate, to indulge, to um, interact with, but it's not necessary to interact with. I don't think you even need to. This might be a bit morbid for some, but I had a thought that the idea of existence, of human existence, isn't really necessary. Down to the individual. The individual can think to themselves, well, my life isn't necessary in an extrinsic sense. Although intrinsically I may feel endowed to another individual, and so I think or I feel as if my life is necessary. I feel I need to be alive. I need to continue living for this other person or for a cause in which I'm fighting for. But extrinsically speaking, one's existence isn't necessary. At least that's my thinking. That's the way I picture it and view it. And I know some people have their uh, disagreements with that thoughts, but I don't know. I just don't agree with the whole. Like at the end, it said he must get back to fulfilling these duties if he wants to become well again. You know, it's like it's all arbitrary. Like what's defined as well? You know, why must he do this in order to be quote unquote well? But like they were saying, I guess it's the due to repression and projecting your problems onto other people. That's where the problem lies, and so they're trying to maybe correct that behavior as it's not as it may not be an efficient way to carry one's life, especially when you live in a world with other people. You're around other people, so I can understand it from that standpoint. But given that the individual is conscious of their unwillingness to participate and they understand they have the choice, I don't think it should be a problem if they decide to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to be a part of this right now. I don't really want to take, part out of, don't want to participate, do your thing. There's no, animosity towards the other group or other people who do participate. It's to each their own. To each their own.
He must get back to fulfilling these duties if he wants to become well again. But some people meet all the demands of social life and attain all the trappings of worldly success: a spouse and a family, a satisfying social life, a good career, as well as ample material success, and yet still become neurotic. Or as Jung writes, psychotherapists are familiar with the collectively adapted person who has everything and does everything that could reasonably be required as a guarantee of health, but yet is ill.
So you recognize this, but
The problem being evaded by these neurotics is not to be found in the outer world, but in the inner world of the psyche. Such individuals are afraid of their individuality and so fail to heed the call of their conscience to develop the idiosyncratic side of their nature.
okay.
He is incapable of living his own life, writes Jung, and finding the character that belongs to him. These neurotics are too normal, they are too conformist, and their social success acts as a barrier to exploring the depths of the psyche. But as the development of the individual side of our nature is just as imperative as our collective development, a failure to adequately differentiate ourselves from others will make us neurotic. Or as Jung writes, there are large numbers of people for whom the development of individuality is the prime necessity, especially in a cultural epoch like ours, which is literally flattened out by collective norms.
Okay.
In my experience, there are very many for whom the development of individuality is an indispensable requirement. To be healed, the all too normal neurotic must experience a symbolic death, or the letting go of much that is familiar and comfortable so the individualistic side of his nature can emerge.
Okay, so I think after, painting both sides of the story, I think I understand where Carl Jung is coming from in regards to finding, I guess, a balance, finding the place of equilibrium, Lord Jesus, for the individual, not to be too conformist and not to be too individualistic, but at the end of the day, you could say it's up to the individual to find that for themselves. And how do you, I guess you can have the ideal, you can have the idea which everyone should look to subjugate to them, to should look to subjugate themselves to. and to look to achieve. But even in that sense, it could be looked at as conforming to an ideal. And so it's like there's so many sides and ways you can look at this, and you can nitpick at it all day. And this is what I do on a daily basis, constantly, just in my head thinking about the different avenues that can be taken to come to, you know, the creation of one standard or one ideal. And it's or not the well, yeah, the creation, the manifestation. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to think about, hard to enact, or hard to put into the physical, to manifest it. Everything is good on paper until you really try to live it out. It's crazy.
Familiar and comfortable, so the individualistic side of his nature can emerge. Or as Jung puts it, that the highest summit of life can be expressed through the symbolism of death is a well known fact. For any growing beyond oneself means death. Character traits, relationships, career choices, and especially habits of thought and behavior, many of these must be sacrificed to permit the birth of the new. Our desire for social validation must be sacrificed as well, and so too the comfort we derive by conforming. For to paraphrase Jung, we need to be drawn out of ourselves onto other paths that permit the full flowering of our character. The neurotic, writes Jung, must in very truth take the way of the individual life path he has recognized as his own, and continue along it until such time as an unmistakable reaction from the unconscious tells him that he is on the wrong track. If we
Mm.
have spent years or decades treading the conformist path of normality, establishing a more idiosyncratic approach to life may seem risky. We may face ridicule, disappoint others, or lose some of our social status. But as Jung writes, if you want to cure a neurosis, you have to risk something. To do something without taking a risk is merely ineffectual. But remaining neurotic is also a risk, but a risk that offers no reward. We will waste our life, waste our potential, and be destined to live out our days plagued by anxiety, depression, self hate, and guilt. And for those afflicted by the neurosis of too much conformity, we should keep in mind that some of us are just not fit to be normal by modern day standards. We need an abnormal existence in order to be healthy. Or as Jung writes, among neurotics, there are not a few who do not require any reminders of their social duties and obligations, but are born and destined rather to be bearers of new cultural ideals. They are neurotic as long as they bow down before authority and refuse the freedom to which they are destined.
Well said. That's a phenomenal ending right there. I think I could speak more on my sole goal in life. I guess you refer to it as, is it a goal? I don't know. But the main idea, I guess, I'm looking for is to just on a trek or on a journey for holiness. And I don't really mean it in a religious sense, but just in regards to being as whole as I can as an individual. I think if I adhere to my thoughts and feelings in such a way that doesn't, hinder the existence, or um, put another existence at a disadvantage, or, purposely step on the shoes of another individual, I think I'm living in such a way that's just and that's fair. I don't ever go out my way to bash another individual or tell them they're doing wrong in what they're doing, or I rarely ever look outside myself and criticize, what's going on. I often criticize what's going on inside because I feel myself to be quite aware of what's taking place mentally, emotionally, and, physically, as I can actually just see myself. But yeah, I don't ever look to step outside myself to apply or give judgment. I don't think that's my place to do so. But, in being aware of myself, I look to judge myself when I look to act in such a way, behave in such a way, carry myself in such a way which I deem efficient. And I think an efficient way is if I can be happy, if I can be at peace with who I am and what I'm doing, and also figure out a way into which to care myself, which appeases those I love, which are around me and close to me. I think that's for me personally, like I said, I think that's a beautiful way to carry out one's life. We all make mistakes here and there, but I think the goal for me is to try to mitigate those and do right by my ideals. And I think that's that could be said for any other individual out there. They're all just looking to live their life accordingly, but I don't know. It's you want to say to each their own, and then something happens to you from somebody outside, and you're like, well, it's to each their own until you do something to me, and it's like, now we got a problem. So it can be stressful to think about, and even though I say I try not to do so, I do it all the time. But anyways, man, that's the end of the video. Make sure, as always, to leave a like. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to turn on post notifications. But as always, if you are not going to do any of that, at the very least, please do leave a comment. I would love to have a conversation with you guys. Good day.